This is workshop 6A, and for those of you, unlike myself, who were here in session 5A, Father James Basic will also be the instructor for this particular workshop. And for many of you that have a rapport with Father already, having heard workshop 5A, let me, as an outsider, make a brief observation or two. As I came in, I heard words like, he spoke at the gut level. He was exciting and clear and articulate. It was an encounter experience. Super neat. All of these things certainly have me interested. I hope all of you who are new will be equally excited to hear Father Basic. And just to review one or two items in his life that should give him great ability to talk to us in the areas that he will. With the academic community, he can share his title as PhD from Oxford, and in sense of mission and the dealing with youth, he is very active in campus ministry. So with this great great wealth of experience and training, it is my pleasure to present Father Basic to you. We'll find out, dearth or wealth. Shouldn't say that. Very fine words. I appreciate that. I was in such, just in gear at the end of the last one. I shouldn't have stopped, I think. I should have just kept going. People wandered out all right. I would have been, had the momentum. I'll have to try to achieve that again. Somebody came up to me during the break and said something. Well, first, let me see how many people are here from last time. How many were at the last session? Oh, wow. Hey, put your hands out. How many were not here? From up here, it literally looks weird. Yeah. It's like everybody raised their hand each time. Something to do with a sense of presence, maybe. I don't know what it is. Well, I don't know. About half and half. Anyway, I was in motion. Somebody did come up to me at the break and asked me something about Pittsburgh. My father happened to be from Pittsburgh, and he says, "You do talk a little funny, like I do." And I reminded me that we set a record after the last talk. It's the first time, and I always talk all over the place. It's the first time that somebody did not come up to me afterwards and say, "Do you know who you sound like?" Yes. People already knew. I see why. I get it, yes. I see. It's just that people are cleverer out here and quicker. Now I see. Okay. I don't feel the same kind of urgency as I felt in the last one to cover things. I feel that the material that I want to deal with is probably not as extensive, and I am feeling more relaxed about covering it and taking our time and doing that. If I gauge the mood right, that might be welcome after a long day and absorbing a lot of material. So maybe a little calmer pace would be good. This is also the first time I've ever allowed the use of this kind of title for any talk that I've given. I generally use the word fundamental a lot in my talk and conversation. I seldom use the word basic, but given my name. But I have consented on this occasion back to the basics with Rahner, and I presume that we again have people in here who have some interest in Rahner. It just amazed me last time how many people had read. I should ask some other things. How many and people ask me what would be a good simple thing into his thought, and I really failed to say that, but that little prayer book I often suggest to people, Encounters with Silence, excellent little prayer book as a way of beginning with his thought. Powerful things there. Rahner's a great man, you know. He's I had the privilege of, while I was writing about him, of spending about 6 or 7 weeks in Munich and getting a chance to talk to him on occasion, and he spent a lot of time with me and making suggestions about my own work and so on. And I will assure you that the man is as powerful personally as he is in writing, and the same sort of appreciation of finding God in the ordinary is part of his everyday life. He just lives that way and has immense energy and interest in what is going on. He is immersed in that. I over the years, I've always been impressed with that kind of thing, that people who are immersed in the world of theology and are good at it end up being good people in one way or another. Certainly not universally true, but I've had happy experiences that way, and Rahner is a good example of it. This time I'm thinking much more of application and using Rahner's thoughts in terms of our work as religious educators, as pastors, as parents, in dealing with other people. I'm thinking very much about the religious education task, although I believe that many of the things I have to say are applicable to ourselves and our own situation. I will end up in the theological section doing some repeating, I think. I'll try to come at it in a little different way, but I believe that wouldn't be all bad, that repetition of the fundamental theological notions could be very helpful, as a matter of fact. And I will try to come at it with a little from a little different angle. So the question, get into gear here. Rev myself up a bit, call on the energy. Well, I'm bouncing off of this return to fundamentals idea, which I take it as around the country there's a lot of that. The sense that in the modern religious education movement that things got fragmented, that people didn't learn the fundamental things of the religion, that people had scattered notions and didn't know how to bring them together, that there was too much process and not enough content going on, that just being nice people or doing nice things in the classroom was not enough. I take it that in the culture as a whole that we find that kind of sense. I know at Bowling Green State University there's a lot of talk of that. I mean, how do we just get it so people can read and write again? How can we get people so they write sentences? So you have to take all these preliminary English courses before you really get into the job of learning at the university. There's a lot of questions how in high school ever we're going to do that. So, I mean, I sense in the country as a whole that there is this business that we have to return somehow to some sort of fundamentals. And in the religious education world, that seems to be played out in terms of this polarity between the cognitive and the affective. At least, I'm not directly in that world. I mean, I teach at a university level, and I give a lot of workshops and so on to religion teachers, but I don't deal directly in that world, and I don't really read the literature regularly, but the summaries that I read lead me to believe that we're still fighting the questions of affective versus cognitive, of what we do in religious education in terms of content is somehow divorced from what we're doing in terms of emotions, and that those two things are not coming together well, and that still we're fighting it and haven't reached any kind of solution. Well, I have another sentence in the beginning there of the handout that there's too much psychology and sociology and not enough solid doctrine.
which I again hear from parents and so on. Now, I realize that there are people around who read those signs of the times and say, yes, what we've got to do is to get back to the way we used to do it. That is, teach the Baltimore Catechism or make sure that people memorize certain things and just get it back to the way it was before. I understand that that is one response to this problem and that it's widespread in some areas of the country. However, I'm really not intending that by my remarks, although it may sound like it, and I'm thinking of this as a more progressive response than that, of not going backwards, but going forward in a constructive way. And I believe that Rahner says a lot of important things that may guide us in that whole process. Okay, that's the problem. Much less time than last session on trying to detail the problem as I see it. Now to turn our attention to the business of responding to it. Now, the first thing is to try to work out a proper anthropology or understanding of man. I feel that so many of our problems in life in general, in theorizing about it and trying to make sense out of ourselves, gets right back to this doctrine of man, how we understand ourselves. And in fact, in one way, the first religious question in the contemporary setting is, who am I? And who am I becoming? Or who are we? Who are we as a community, and who are we becoming? Oh, in a classical theology, the first question was always, who is God, right? That's the way the catechisms traditionally began. That is very much of a top-down theology. Who is God? What are God's attributes? And what will that mean to me? You hear a lot of people preach that way. A lot of people preach by starting with the Bible, starting with doctrine, starting with the church teaching, and then saying, now how will I apply that to people's lives? That is a classical style, a top-down, a from-above approach. Now you'll notice that much of what I say, following Rahner, looks very different from that. It is, in fact, a polar opposite. It is to begin with man and how we understand man. It is to begin with ourselves. That's what becomes the involving question. That is what interests us. I mean, to teach a course that begins with the question, who am I, has an inherent interest in it. I mean, there's not too many people around who aren't interested in that. Who am I? There's a lot of people around who aren't interested in who is God. They don't care. They turned them off long ago. They don't understand what the word God means, etc. But there are not many people who can turn off the question, who am I? So it's involving, whenever I deal with people who are not Christians, who are atheistic or agnostic in one way or other, I try to begin in that broad kind of human experience. So it's important to begin with the question of who am I, and at least that's how I'm trying to approach it here. Well, that's what I mean by a philosophical anthropology. Now, what are we going to say about us? Well, one of the first things I want to say is that we respond to life as a unified whole. We're not, first of all, split. One of the problems in modern thought ever since Descartes in the 17th century and since is that we have thought of ourselves as split, as somehow an accidental union of body and soul, or somehow as a combination, an accidental combination of head and heart, of emotion and cognition. And I really think that that is not a true and valid way of looking at who we are. And I think if we look at the best of our experience, we'll see that we really respond to life as a unified whole. Take experience when we're really involved in conversation, or when when we fall in love, when we're really close to somebody. Then, I mean, these splits don't seem to make sense, do they? I mean, that's physical, very physical, bodily. That's the head and the heart together. In fact, one of the signs of that is that we feel whole. When the relationship is going well, we feel integrated. We feel as one. We might not think about it, but that's how we're responding. Take the aesthetic experience, maybe to be immersed in music, to be listening to music that is powerful to us for one reason or another, that grabs us. Then we are immersed. We feel ourselves involved, and we act as this totality. So I think not only is it not true at a theoretical level, but as an actual fact that of our experience that we respond as a whole. That's the best biblical sense of man, too, just to reinforce the notion. Man in the Bible is a whole being. The split between body and soul was not particularly real to the Hebraic mentality. So, that's where we want to begin. Now, what I'm saying is that as a whole, we also find ourselves immediately immersed in a world. We're not people, as Descartes sort of thought, standing in a building looking out a window wondering if things are out there or not. We are not an isolated individual just trying to figure out, well, I wonder if I'll relate to those people or not. I'll wonder if I should get involved or not. That's not the truth of the matter. The truth is that we are already necessarily involved in our world. We're part of it. We can't grow without being close to our parents. We can't, without the love that they give us, we can't come to any kind of maturity. We don't know who we are except that people feed that back to us. Our very identity is so sociologically oriented. People let us know. We relate with somebody, we act in a dumb way, and then we see that in their eyes, or we see that in the look they give us, and we begin to say, wait a second here, I must be off base. I see that happening in good marriages. I watch, there's a nonverbal communication that goes on. It says, you're out of line, or that's dumb, or knock it off, or whatever. And that seems to me the way we come to know ourselves, who we really are. Now, part of this being a unified whole is to see that knowing and loving are not, first of all, distinct things. Where they say love is blind. But there's a way in which that isn't true, isn't it? It's the people we love who we know in a special way. The people we love, and we see them do something, we say we know them in a way no one else does. The outsider looking in just sees one aspect of it, or they don't understand. But we say that we know because we are involved with them, we care about them, we love them. So there's a way in which it's not true that love is blind. One way, at least. I think there are other ways it is true. But that much, it allows us an entree into the other person so that we do know them in a special way. So again, I think the best of our experience says that this split that is plagued the religious education world is really undercut. There's a way in which head and heart are really together. I don't say they can't ever be in opposition, but the best of our experience says that we are unified in that way. A lot of heavy material here at the beginning. And I guess people just have to try to bear with that and see if it makes sense or not. And I go with it. So that's a second step now in this anthropology. We are first of all, I'm saying, a total person, and we are secondly necessarily related. This is going to be very important later on, I think, as we try to develop this to get this clear. The third thing that I want to say is that we are essentially related to mystery. Now, somebody came up to me after the last talk and said something that made me think that they had heard some rationalistic tendencies in what I said, that I was being, overly logical or rationalistic, and I really would want to avoid that. I quoted to them what Chesterton's line, which is a little vague. I don't know if I got it exactly right, but he said something like, rationalism is that strange sort of insanity where you have lost everything except your mind. Which is true. What happens, of course, in a rationalistic approach to life is that we lose all of the emotive side of it. all of the affective, all of the imaginative and symbolic side of it. So I'd want to avoid that rationalistic thing by saying that the truest thing we can know about ourselves is that we are essentially related to mystery. And what does that mean? That means, first of all, that I understand myself as being contingent. I didn't make myself to be, and I don't control when I'm going out of existence, even though I might try it through suicide. Well, I find that that is not a bad way of preventing some suicides, is to point out that people cannot escape from themselves. And I know people who don't commit suicide on that very ground, that saying that I can't get away from myself even if I would overdose or something. So we don't have that kind of control. That's one way of understanding this business, that we are indeed immersed in this world of mystery. In Christian terms, what that means is that we are oriented to God, and that we don't have our existence apart from Him. But we've got to know, there's a lot of problems with that word God. I only alluded to that in the other talk, but the problem with the word God is that many people around say they don't know what it might mean. That's a new question. And see, in the times past, people might say, I accept God or I reject Him. But today, I talk to people at least, and you're talking about God, and they say, well, I don't even know what you might mean by that. What do you possibly mean by that word God? And that creates a really greater problem for us. And later on, maybe I should say something practical here. I feel that I'm being awfully abstract, which I don't want to do, but it feels necessary. But later on, this is going to come into play, and I'll tell you how, just to keep people with me. Later on, I'm going to ask people to write down a creed, a creedal statement. Try to compose one. That is a short summary statement of what we mean when we say we are Christians. So I'm going to say something like, as a Christian, I believe. And we're going to spend a little time at that. And it's essential to keep in mind the point I'm making right now, that just to say to people, well, I believe in God, may not be a meaningful statement. That might not be the best language you can use in trying to talk to somebody. Sometimes you have to hold off on that word God. Somebody asked me at the break again about dealing with a very serious problem in another person, and that their own language, religious language, wasn't getting through. And I quoted to them a line from J.C. Hokendijk, the Protestant ecclesiologist, who said one time in a class I was in, there's more than one way to take the Lord's name in vain. And we said, oh yeah, what is that? And he says, well, to say it when no one is interested in hearing it or not ready to hear it. And which bears on this question, you see, of what we're talking about here, of the very word God, the very religious language becomes problematic, questionable. Many people don't understand it. You can't anymore in our world just get up and talk about grace and revelation and God and Christ without giving an experiential base. Well, that's why the common thing in religious education is that you can't give answers before there's questions. But that doesn't mean it just theoretically. It means that you can't tell people things that mean anything to them unless there's a fund of experience, unless there's something going for them in their life that presses forward for them this kind of religious question. So, when I say, therefore, it's all a long parenthesis on saying that man is one essentially related to mystery, is a better way in my mind of saying it, first of all, to a group than saying we're essentially related to God. Eventually, I think it's true that the mystery that surrounds us all, that envelops us, that knocks at our heart, is the good God, the one God in the world, the one we call Father and stand in awe of as we call Him Lord. That's all connected, but you need a starting point. Isn't it true that one of the tricks in religious education is to know where you begin? And part of it is to tap the right experiences, whether you're a parent, teacher, or preacher, or lecturer, or whatever. Okay, so that's all by way of saying the third thing in my anthropology here is that man is essentially oriented to mystery. We know it when we reach our limits, and we know it when we're feeling good. The ecstatic and the boundary experiences. Well, that won't mean anything to people who weren't here at the last talk, so why did I say that? I was going to avoid that. Totally new. All right, now, in religious education, the thing that comes up very often, people will say, well, if you begin in experience, when do you bring God in? If you begin with psychological and sociological analyses, then where does the doctrine start? Where does God brought into the picture? That's the common kind of objection I hear. Clear? I mean, isn't that true? I'm not seeing too many affirmative faces, but isn't that what happens? If you, in religious ed, if you start your inexperience and doing a psychological analysis, people say, yeah, but what about God? Well, fundamental answer out of a Rahnerian framework is to say you don't bring God in anywhere. You don't bring God in at any point. After 1 week, 2 hours, a month, 10 years, age 21, you never bring him in because you don't have to, because he's always already there. Because the experience of self is the experience of God. Because whenever we experience ourselves in any depth, that is precisely how we experience God. There isn't any other way to do it. When people get up this morning and say, did you look out at the mountains and you see that? What is important about it isn't that the mountain is there. It is what it does to the person. It's the experience of self in observing the mountain that is of paramount importance. I feel the power of God when I look at that mountain, the man says. No, I am moved to words of praise as I look at that. I have a sense of awe and wonder. My day is a little brighter because I had that experience. I understand something more about myself. That's where it is. You see what I mean? The self-experience. It's the same way encountering a person. I don't just say, it's not an objective kind of encounter like, there she is, and now what do I do about it or something. Where I am looking for God is in that total experience that I am involved in. The experience of self is the experience of God. In fact, I think you could make a chart of this where you get a perfect correlation. So if you give me somebody and they say who has a poor self-image, whose self-experience is always interpreted negatively, we are going to find a poor image of God. So this person that hates themselves is going to have some sort of an image of God that is of a wrathful, angry God. Those two things go together. And as people's self-image improves, as their outlook on their common experience improves, the whole notion of God will improve. That's why my answer to people is not for the person who's struggling with guilt and sin and feeling bad about themselves. The first word they don't is not doctrine, really. It's a good experience. It's to be in a group where they are accepted, to have parents who give them a compliment, to have a teacher who will pat them on the shoulder and say, nice work. That's what they need. They need an enduring kind of relationship that will help to improve that. Then you have a basis for dealing with the doctrines that speak of God and Christianity as this loving Father. Up till then, you can't do it. So that is really what is needed at rock bottom. You don't bring God in any place because He's already there and always there. What you try to do is elicit that, to plumb the depths of that, to force people to look beneath the surface. The problem isn't beginning in experience, it's stopping short. Sure, you can talk about sex to people, and if you talk about it just in terms of performance or rating another person on a scale of 1 to 10 in bed, well then the problem isn't that you began an experience, it is that you haven't rooted it, you haven't deepened it, we haven't put sex into the context of human relationships and into the mysterious notion of love and the mysterious other person that we're involved in when we're trying to love. That's how we deepen. So one of the skills of the educator, the parent, in all of this is to know how to do that. How do you take the questions that are there and begin to show that somehow there is more to it than meets the eye? That's the first skill I would try to inculcate in a religious educator. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you don't find that on a survey. Data doesn't give it to you. Again, you probably notice I'm not big on data that way. I always feel I learn more by sitting down and talking to somebody than reading a sociological survey. I'm sure that's my own bias. But the point of talking to somebody is that you can deepen the question. You can probe it a bit and say, well, what do you mean by that? Or why do you say this? Or did you link it up with this? Or what does that mean in the bigger picture? You can take the teenage desire for a car and find out something about the question of the meaning of life. What does the desire for the car mean? It means something about independence. What does independence mean to you? And why do you want to be independent? And what is your real notion of freedom? Is it as an autonomous person, cut off from everything, riding around in your car? Or what? In other words, even a question like that, why can't I have a car now, becomes a potential religious question. And not only that, but it becomes a great opportunity to listen to dialogue to find out what is going on. Experience of self is the experience of God. It's a primary Rahnerian thesis. Now, that statement has a history, too. That means the growth in the sense of oneself, one's self-experience, will mean a corresponding growth in religious opportunities. So I would expect people's ability to absorb religious notions to grow as their experience expands. There's where you're back to that whole thing about not giving too much too soon. Ronald Goldman, Readiness for Religion, back in the day. Too much too soon is negative. Too much too soon turns people off. They get glutted. Their religious sensibilities are blunted. They don't care about the questions anymore. I'll bet that we all find that in our own lives. When you find it is in listening to a familiar gospel story, one that we heard when we were little. And I think what happens is we still hear it like we did when we were little. Do you ever notice what it takes a really strong psychic effort to rid ourselves of that and say, now I will hear it as an adult. I'll hear it according to the experiences I bring to it now, according to my new questions. I think we really have to work at that. So too much too soon is bad because it turns the young people off, whether it's commitment we're asking from them or doctrine. Experience of self is the experience of God. We have to respect the growth, the history of the experience of self. People don't have full-blown notions. Like Hubert Humphrey said, asked the little boy, he always repeated this story, he says, who are you? And he says, well, I don't know because I'm not finished yet. There is that sense of growth. We're not finished yet. That's what we've learned from the existentialist literature. We are in process. We are making ourselves to be what we will be forever. Hopefully tomorrow you and I will be in a little different place than we are today. So the history of the experience of self is the history of the experience of God. There is a growth, and we have to be willing to go with that. Now we get a repetitive point, I suppose, but necessary, and that is the theology of revelation reminds us that all things are potentially revelatory. Everything can speak to us of God. There's no reason why we can't tap any authentic human experience and try to see it as pointing to the great God. Why it cannot raise the question of a source to our life and a goal for our strivings. That's the kind of thing that I think that we have to begin to tap. All things are potentially revelatory. God is in everything. It's a very immanent notion of God. God who is part of the process, who is to be found in the whole business. Now, the next thing I'm trying to say here is that about the verbal objectifications. Again, it's an idea I dealt with before, but I catch everybody else up on it, that we need the explicit word. I am not arguing for just tapping somebody's inner experience and not relating it to anything else. What is necessary in religious education is that experience is related to what the Christian tradition holds. That when we're looking at people's experience of themselves, we want to see what light can be shed on it from Jesus of Nazareth. We have to take what it says in the Scriptures and allow it to interact with those questions. The verbalization is important. We can't go around and just say, well, forget all of that. We will just simply draw out what people are thinking. That's not good enough. It's not good enough in a group like this. It's not good enough when we're in the classroom. It's not good enough for parents. I don't see us just being passive with the next generation, saying, well, what do you think? Or what do you feel? There is a next step in it, and that is to say, here's what the Christian tradition says. Here is what we believe. Here, I stand here. I find light in this. This is what I hold. And now we have to match that with what you're going through and see if it won't help you in some way. Then I have that sentence there in A2, whenever individuals or communities correctly interpret their deeper experiences, God's truth and goodness and beauty is manifest. You know what that means? That very important point that divides religious educators, yet depending on their theology. That is, can I expect to find answers in the culture? Can I expect to find good insights on how to live from the humanistic psychologists, for example, from Rollo May or Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow? Can I expect to find it from the sociologists, from Buddhism, from Hinduism, even from Marxism? And the answer out of this theological framework that I'm trying to develop, which is dependent on Rahner, is that yes, you can. The answers are to be found elsewhere and not just in our good book, the Bible. Legitimate insights into what human life is all about can be found there and ought to be tapped. We can use those answers. For those of you who are more into theology, you understand the fight here is between the notion of Paul Tillich and Karl Rahner. So Tillich says that the culture experience provides only the questions, and that Christianity and Revelation gives us the answers. And I'm saying that, and a lot of people follow that in their religious education practice. I believe it is more narrow than it has to be. I believe that in Rahner's theology what it says is, no, you can draw on those other people. You can see what they have to say. So if I'm doing this class on development of friendship, and there's no reason at all why I can't draw on Abraham Maslow's idea of how relationships should go, and tell people about how to become a better lover in that way, use his psychological language of self-actualization, and the need to not to get over our own problems and trying to love other people. All of that beautiful thing that you find in Maslow's work on self-actualization and peak experiences, no reason at all it can't be used in the classroom. Well, not because it's not because it's opposed to the gospel, it's because God's truth filters up in that world as well as in others. So that's what I'm meaning here by this idea that God's truth and goodness is manifest wherever people are responsive to the inner word, to the word of revelation. Well, that's another way of trying to set the theological framework. That is hard material. It includes two vital kinds of ideas, and I suppose those are more theologically oriented, have to extract it and see where it came from. It is an anthropology, a notion of man. You see, it sees us as one person responding to the mystery in our world, and always trying to objectify it, say it in words, but we can't do it. But the attempt to say it is important. It's like two people who are in love. They can say, we're in love. I mean, they know it, but it helps to say it. The verbalization can enrich it. The verbal saying, I love you, can help to cement the relationship. It can help to assure the other person, help to get over arguments, whatever. The verbalizations remain vital in this religious education thing. We have to be sure of that. We have to feel confident of it. So that's the anthropology, and the theology is one I'm suggesting here of Revelation. A lot of you people know it through Gabriel Moran. Moran popularized Rahner's thought for us in that book, The Theology of Revelation. Maybe we should ask how many people read that. Moran's Theology of Revelation. Well, good smattering. That is a popularization of this Rahnerian theology here. Gregory Baum has done the same thing. So that's why, if it sounds familiar, it's probably because it has been made known through those particular channels. Okay, heavy stuff. Now, let us, I think we need to see if we can assimilate that or try. Why don't we do a one-to-one discussion? We've tried this before, some veterans in here. What I want you to do now is turn to the person next to you, and I'd like you to try to verbalize it in turn, to be able to say, what did I get out of it? Who am I? What did I learn about who I am through that? Is there anything said there that helps me to know better who I am, to interpret my own experience? Anything said that strikes responsive chords? I must say, one of the happier events from the first session was when people came up to me afterwards and said things like, "You said clearly what I was feeling vaguely. You articulated something that I was going through," or "You gave me the words as a handle on my experience." Now, the words are a lot more abstract this time, but I'm wondering if maybe somehow that same thing didn't happen. I'd like you to try. Might be a good chance to stand up as you do it, and then we will move into this next section. Right, and intend to follow along the outline on the handout now and to use that as the basis of this response once we've established this, the context. It is certainly true that we live in a complex and changing world. The desire for security really is intensified in such a world. I don't think that we can just shove that off. I believe that, especially for Catholics who knew a pre-Vatican II world, we must continuously be encouraging people to live with complexity, to realize that a lot of the moral questions are not as black and white as we once thought. We must learn to live with pluralism. There are a plurality of theological opinions on almost any question you can think of. We have to keep teaching people to think for themselves. All of that is true. Many of the absolutes simply will never return. Most people, or a lot of people in the world, are knowing now that not all Catholics agree on everything, that we don't live in a monolithic church. Even our Protestant friends begin to know that about us. Therefore, there's no sense of returning to that other world. It is impossible. There are various options today, and they're going to be exercised. There's various movements in the church, and we're not going to get some sort of a unified whole with them. There's going to continue to be more progressive elements and more conservative ones. There will be the charismatics and those who have a lower-keyed piety. We're going to continue to have that kind of pluralism, and there's no sense in going backwards. So I've got to get that clear. I don't mean that in any sense, because I just think it's impossible. There's a lot of people I hear who want to return to Christendom, get it all together like that. My father's like that. He always tell me, "When are you going to put the lid back on it?" He tells me. That's his image. Quit running around the country, opening up questions. When are you going to put the lid back on it? And I tried to tell him. But he doesn't even like liturgical dancing at our place, so I don't know how am I ever going to convince him of anything. Funny thing, I found my father to be right about so many things over the years, and continuously so. And therefore, when he tells me that, I don't just shrug it off, because I think it is pointing to a real need. in the midst of that pluralism and complexity, we need something to hang on to. We still need the rock of security. I think it's silly for us to say we don't have anything to offer in that situation except encouragement to live with the complexity and the pluralism. I think we have a lot more than that to say, and we have to say it. It's about time we get around to doing it. We must balance it. There's got to be the dialectic between living in an open, gray world and having this sure, secure thing to hang on to. Now we've got to see what that really is, and we've got to be able to present it to the next generation. But I suppose first we got to figure out what it is for ourselves. Now, I think that it's the notion I want to say is that we must present Christianity as the response to the question that we are. I want to play with that idea for a while. Rahner says, in answer to the question, who is man? He says, man is the question for whom there is no answer. Man is the question for whom there is no answer, which points to the essential mysteriousness of our life. The fact that there is no unambiguous, sure kind of thing that's going to take away all the search in life and give us total security. However, let's focus on the first half, that man is the question. Now we have to say, I think, that what Christianity remains a response to that, to the essential question that we are.
This completes side 1 of this tape. To continue, simply fast forward this side to its end and restart on side 2.